morning, good evening, wherever you are, and welcome back to the Enterprise AI Show. This is your host, Aaron, and today, Brian speaks with Melissa Rosenthal from Outlever about the intersection of AI, brand, and marketing. They explore how AI impacts trust, brand consistency, and operational efficiency. Melissa also offers insights for organizations navigating AI adoption. And all of that is coming up right after this break.
Today's show is sponsored by Nasuni. There's a growing gap in AI right now between what's possible in theory and what successfully works at scale inside an enterprise. The difference comes down to unstructured file data. Many AI initiatives struggle because the file data they depend on is scattered, unstructured, and disconnected from where and how work actually happens. Nasuni changes that. It brings your unstructured file data into a single, secure foundation so AI, both generative and agentic, can access it with the context, governance, and performance it needs in production. Bring AI to where your unstructured data lives. See what it takes to activate your data for AI and request a demo at nasuni.com/AI. Today's show is sponsored by ShareGate. You're out of time. Copilot needs to be deployed ASAP, but your tenant really isn't ready for it. Years of data, permissions, and users lurk in its shadows, ready to be exposed by AI. ShareGate Protect sees it all, so you can find the exposure risks, fix them fast, and deploy AI with confidence. Microsoft 365 Governance, they've got this. Learn more at sharegate.com/protect. And we're back, and today I think is going to be fun. We're going to be doing things a little different than we tend to do in terms of really digging into enterprise AI technology and really looking at some of the intersection of how this technology, your decisions around AI, are going to impact your business and impact your business in ways that are going to be, more than just what did you buy, what are you implementing, but how does the market look at how you're implementing these technologies? How does it impact them? And so really excited to introduce Melissa Rosenthal, who is co-founder of Outlever, as well as editor-in-chief of State of AI. Melissa, welcome to the show. Great to have you on.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. Excited to be here.
I had reached out to you a little while ago, just before the summer got busy and people were doing vacations, but I'd read a great article that your group had written called "New Data Shows Your AI Employee is Destroying Trust Faster Than It's Cutting Cost." And it kind of grabbed my attention because it focused not just on people implementing technology, but really, some of the outcomes or some of the byproduct of, what happens when we start replacing humans with AI or AI processes. I'm really excited to kind of dig into this. I'm curious, can you give us a little bit of background about Outlever and where you kind of focus on? Because it really is the intersection of AI within businesses, but also how it impacts people's brand and marketing and other things like that.
Yeah, I mean, it's a little different. So effectively, we're rethinking like what the go-to-market strategy is, and we're AI native in the product and the technology that enables us to do what we do. But we're actually very human in our approach to brand building and content and go to market, because I think that AI is great for system building, for process, for automation, for allowing things to move faster, for the connection of things that would have taken a lot of different people and workflows that things that were not possible, I would say, a few years ago. We wouldn't have been able to build what we build today. But effectively, our output is very human because we're able to create all these workflows and have all these agents working in real time on all of these different pieces of our product. So it's kind of an interesting intersection of seeing the best in class, I would say, input from AI, and then the output is very human as a result of that. So that's where we sit.
Right. So I'm curious. I'll start with this. You guys you do a bunch of research. You've collected a bunch of data. What are you seeing as companies start either putting quote unquote AI employees, or in this case typically AI agents, but they start talking about kind of this blurred line between what's an employee interaction or a human interaction and an AI interaction? What have you seen happening in the market? What are some of the upsides, but maybe even some of the downsides that people need to be aware of?
Yeah, I mean, I think AI is really great for routing people to different endpoints, depending upon what it is we're talking about. If it's a contact center, right? If it's a CS solution, it kind of depends in the threshold of where the endpoint actually is and who is interacting with that. If you're a consumer facing product that you're putting AI to directly interact with your customers, I think that there's a lot that can potentially go wrong. And I think you have to try to mitigate that. The interesting thing that we're seeing like across the board is that there's still like a lot of places. I hate to say this because I think it's getting better. And I think there's definitely guardrails you can put, but there's definitely a lot of places it can go off the rails. So there's this, the confines in what it can actually do, I think is really important right now because it will take liberties in a way. And it will like try to come up with its own solutions and workshop. And, sometimes sometimes we see companies where their agents are overriding, certain pieces of of brand or systems or guidelines that they've put in place. So I think it's really just like, how do you make it work for you, but be really rigid in the outcome that you're looking for at this point? Because I think at this point, it takes too many liberties sometimes when it's trying to develop a solution on its own. The end of the kind of like where we were alluding to with this article and some of the research that shows is that it's starting to, I would say brand is a touch point, whether it's the marketing materials that you're running, the support person that you talk to on the phone, it's every touch point with a company. It's the landing page, the website. And I think the interesting thing is that now you're integrating like agentic workflows and people into that brand, but we're not really treating them like they're a brand touch point. So you're having people, interact directly with agents and directly with AI, but the AI isn't really adhering to like the brand in the way that it should be. So all of a sudden you're having this experience that perhaps doesn't match what the company stands for or what the typical experience is because they're implementing software to make themselves more efficient and they're not training it on the right thing. So it's basically like if you're going to hire, or create agentic solutions that effectively become employees, if they're having an end touch point with your consumer, how do you make sure that there's this rigid line within where they sit and like how they operate? Because at the end of the day, like that can go pretty wrong pretty fast. So I think it's just everyone is kind of figuring out what that is and what, how to train them so that like it's a reflection of the brand as it scales.
Right. Yeah, no, it makes sense. I think we tend to go, I'm going to train this agent, or I'm going to build a harness for this agent around, kind of rules and data. But yet for human employees, if we're, trying to create the Chick-fil-A experience or the high-end hotel experience or the luxury car dealer experience, that's a whole different set of training that maybe we don't necessarily know how to quantify. And hence, like you said, it sort of doesn't get into that feel that you expect from working with some given brand or something. As you're starting to work with companies on this, or as you're evaluating the market, like what are you finding? I imagine the customer response is sort of negative, but like what actually happens, or how do companies think about responsibility when AI makes a bad decision or a decision that doesn't feel like that? I mean, is it typically only felt in kind of some customer satisfaction survey, or are you seeing companies trying to realize or rationalize, okay, how do we deal with this better, or how do we even measure when it's making mistakes?
Yeah, I mean, to be clear, we don't implement this technology.
Sure.
So everything that we're hearing is just like kind of across the market and things that I'm doing as the editor-in-chief of State of AI and the research that my team is doing. But what we are seeing is that it's like fail a lot first, and then like let's figure it out on the back end. I think there's a lot of maybe for the first time ever, companies are feeling like the guardrails and the safety wheels can be kind of taken off a little bit in certain capacities where there's more room to fail because everyone's experimenting with like outcomes and what that looks like. So we're not really seeing that be built in too much to start. I think there's going to be like once companies are able to move past the pilot stage, which I think a lot of them are still very much in, they'll start to understand like how it actually fits within the guardrails of the brand and the touch points and how they treat it like a true like CS employee or contact center employee. But I think for right now, like there's not as much like, I guess, company-wide governance over like what AI does and how it functions. We find it to be very like department specific, and also there's just not as as many guardrails on it as you would kind of expect. I think maybe because everyone's in the stage together. So we're not really seeing that. I think, the questions are being raised and asked, and I think like the research is being done, but like the proactiveness on like the preventing, a bad experience with AI. I don't know if we're like there yet, because I think everyone is still very much figuring out like what the long-term play and what the long-term workflow looks like for any of this. Like everything is in a pilot stage, which I think is really interesting because, companies are all these AI native companies. And I think there's definitely ROI, and I think there's definitely use cases, and I think it's going to only get better. But a lot of what we're seeing right now is, companies calculate ARR on AI products that are in a 3-month test period, like no one has implemented ROI, like AI, to the point where they know exactly what they're getting on their returns, and they understand what the cost balance is of real people versus or agents versus the token costs. And I think it's just, there's so much kind of TBD that, brand might also fall at that stage in which like they don't even know how much money this is going to cost them to use, in the long run.
Yeah, no, I think what you're seeing, what you're hearing is very much aligned to what we're hearing anecdotally as well. As a couple of points. I think we're still very much in the early innings in terms of these are proof of concepts. There isn't sort of top down awareness or guidance on things. It's you were running a section of your business before, you're trying to do it better, you bring AI into it. You're not even necessarily, collaborating with other groups within your organization. You're just trying to solve a specific problem. Do you get any feedback or any sense at this point of, beyond just, hey, we're in POC stage, or we're kind of winging it because, there aren't really best practices? Like, are you seeing any kind of stories, compelling stories come out of it where people are going, oh, okay, that's a step in the right direction, or that should be a metric that we should be measuring against, or anything that kind of gives us a sense of what learnings are coming out of these POCs?
Yeah, I mean, I think obviously, like, this is a very broad question because it changes across vertical and use case and everything. But I think you're definitely starting to see the time efficiencies, right? It's like time to ticket close, time to ticket solve, time to how many times did on like a contact center POC where they needed to speak with an actual person because the agent couldn't resolve the order. Like there's definitely efficiencies that are starting to show. I think the ultimate like ROI is the TBD part, but it's definitely speeding things up. And I think like right now it's an efficiency tool more than it is like fully an outcome tool. Outside of engineering, because I would say that that's very different. If we're talking about like engineering versus like a solution for solution and replacement for people within specific roles and disciplines, different. But engineering, it is like sped up everything like 100x. It's the most, I think.
And that makes sense. And that obviously plays out in the data. We're seeing so many AI companies start to shift a little more of their focus, or a lot of their focus, towards like, let's help software developers. Let's focus on AI workflows. You obviously come from a brand and marketing background. As you talk to CMOs or marketing leaders, do you find they kind of have a checklist of like, these are the types of things we feel like AI is most appropriate for, whether it's, in design, or whether it's customer facing, or, like, do you feel like they have a priority list that they feel confident like those are going to provide improvements, or it's still, kind of let's try it on everything and see where that goes?
Yeah. I don't know if I'm allowed to curse on here, but it's a shit show.
Oh, sure.
There's definitely not a checklist.
Yeah.
I would say every organization is approaching it differently. Some are really not using it at all. Some are enabling themselves more than they are like a top down from the department level, where, this person has their own agentic workflow for 5 different things that they do. And they're trying to think about how they roll it out for their team, but they aren't. So they're just doing it themselves to make themselves more efficient. Then there's other team leaders who are like, hey, this is what I've been working on myself and I'm rolling it out to my team, but it's definitely not a company level. And on a leadership level, marketing leadership, it's, the mandate is like, figure out how to use AI. That's it. And then everyone is just trying to figure out how they use AI. I think that's kind of what we're seeing. some companies are using it for design and for decks, but like then there's, the human element of like they need to check it. Some companies are saying it can't be used for very specific things because it's slopifying like everything, and like effectively people are really tuning out in terms of their need and ability to like want to check their work or check others' work, and it's like the whole thing is just becoming like a pile of the same. I think some brand leaders are very nervous that like they're seeing elements of what we wrote about like on the State of Brand, which is called the Great Flattening, where like there were 5 different companies, I think, surveyed, like enterprise level public companies across 5 different verticals, and their voice started to sound the exact same across their marketing materials. And like, that's pretty scary, like at the end of the day, when product is at a parity level where you can create a product in 3 months that, took years, differentiation is really important within what you do, what you say, how you come to life, what you show the world. And if it all sounds the same, I think it's going to be trouble. So I think everyone's trying to figure it out. Not definitive, like this is how they use it.
Yeah, no, that makes total sense. We're very much in sort of early innings, a little bit of chaos. Like you said, it's this mix of like, how do I make the technology work? There seems to be a lot of concern of like, okay, if we figure out how to make this technology work, do the people who figure it out, they still need to be around? So you've got job concerns and so forth. I mean, if you were, just kind of based a little bit on what you're seeing and hearing, and then, where you think things are going, where do you think you see a marketing organization, a year from now? What have they prioritized for success, or what have they maybe eliminated in terms of, that didn't give us what we thought, we're moving on to some other stuff? Do you have any sort of sense of where you think we might be, 6 months from now, a year from now? I know it's hard to always predict the future.
Yeah. I mean, I think there'll be a lot of redefining of roles, because I think that actually needs to happen first around what the outcomes are and the people that are actually needed to have those outcomes, and then how to get to them faster. Because I think if you're trying to organize a marketing department around like this amorphous thing, like it's not like it's never going to be utilized in the capacity that it should be. So I think the optimization and the reorchestration of teams around outcomes, I think more will gravitate towards that. And I think we'll actually see a lot of that, where it's like, what do we need to achieve? Who do we need on a human side to get there? Because what is it that we do that cannot be replicated by AI or made more efficient? And then everything else we backfill with ways that we can make it more efficient. So for instance, like if you're an events leader and you need to put on 100 dinners a year, what can you templatize? And what can you create workflows around that can automate and make all of that admin grunt work, the same task, like automate that, right? And make that easier and more efficient, so you save X percentage of your time doing that. And then the people that actually host the dinners and get the people invited and all of that, like that's the human element of the thing that we need to actually do. So, thinking about, okay, this is the task and the outcome. This is the portion that cannot be replicated. These are the things that we want to make more efficient, and we want to automate with AI. Like, well, how do we structure ourselves around that? That's how I think the best marketing companies will start, or marketing teams will start to think about their use of it.
Yeah. I'll ask you one last question, because I know you're busy running a whole bunch of different things. We nerds tend to get wrapped up in, what's the technology? How did you do it? What was the process? What are we missing? What are the other parts of the conversations you're having at this intersection of brand and AI and marketing and AI that, we didn't talk about today, or we're just, it doesn't come natural to us as technologists? What's, what is that sort of missing link maybe that helps us connect the dots?
Can you just maybe rephrase in terms of like...
Yeah, I guess what I'm trying to figure out is as technologists, we're thinking about chatbots and AI agents and things like that. Marketing folks, obviously, technology kind of comes second. You're thinking about brand. You're thinking about market growth. What's the conversation that you're seeing, which starts in that marketing and domain, marketing and brand discipline, that is like, okay, yeah, I'm going to have to deal with AI, but the nerds kind of get stuck in the weeds of it. Like, what did we not talk about today that's, part of sort of every day that you're talking about?
I mean, I think it's also like, how do you bridge, like everything is very siloed right now.
Yeah.
Like if we're talking about marketing specifically, like there are segments of teams that don't talk to each other on a daily basis, which to me like is just a recipe for disaster before. But I think now like there's a lot of people that are trying to build their own systems, but the systems don't talk to each other. So if you're not building a workflow that works through the entirety of like the team and the setup, like there's a lot that is being missed, I think. So it's like people are trying to like make themselves more valuable and show that they're using AI, but like there's a whole bunch of people that like are integrated within this team that also need to be like that also need workflows that automate and make their stuff more efficient. And I think like we're missing like it's like it's kind of an orchestration layer, but like how do all these things talk to each other, and how do they all talk to each other in a way that makes sense for the people that are, you know, responsible for the actual outcome? And I think it's a mess right now. So in terms of like where the fixes and improvements need to come from, it's that to start, because you have a bunch of people now. It's basically the same thing that happened with SaaS, right? Like there were 1,000 point solutions being used for a ton of different things. And it's like you have teams doing the same thing, but they're using different SaaS tools. And like I think we're starting to see like the beginnings of fractions of that. If there's no like top down, like, hey, we need to all be, you know, onboarded on this very specific thing, and this is how we work and this is how we do it, where there's still the flexibility with AI because it kind of should work where you are, whether it's Slack or all of that. But, you know, like that was a mess because you had people doing like creating, you know, documents in this tool and another part of the team's doing it in a different tool, and like nothing talked to each other, and you're spending all this money creating all this stuff and nothing actually like was orchestrated or like synced.
Right.
And I think there's like a lot of like kind of major fixes that need to be implemented at that layer.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. It is funny how often these things repeat themselves. Like you said, we were doing this 10, 12 years ago with, you know, there was 1,000 SaaS options and people picked all 1,000 of them. And then, yeah, your data sources weren't aligned. Your coordination of it wasn't aligned. And like you said before, you know, so much of this is fairly new, even to the leadership teams, that they don't have like an exact answer to give to people. And so in that vacuum, people go off and figure out what they can figure out. So
and I mean, certainly like older enterprises, let's just say, like they're getting pressure from the boards, they're getting pressure from investors in the stock market to both utilize AI and then also show ROI from it. Like
exactly.
And they don't have the answers. So they're just like creating these kind of, you know, maybe like a little bit of an empty mandate to like use it, which, you know, isn't really like great for outcomes.
No, and it's an expensive way to experiment, maybe even more so than it was in the SaaS days. So
yeah, and I think everyone's learning that very fast too. That the experimentation that was happening and the failure and the non-showing of ROI, all good and well while tokens are being subsidized, but when the actual real costs start coming to fruition, you know, when everything starts kind of netting out to where like tokens are actually how much they actually cost for the models and what people are building. I think I don't know if you've seen these, but it's like my Anthropic bill went from $200,000 a year to 1.5 million a year. And
right.
Like when you start seeing the bill come in for that, like the math starts not to add up in the same way with experimentation and just like kind of the way that people are using it right now. So I don't know, it's a lot to be seen. I think the bill is going to dictate a lot of like how we see people structure around these tools.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And we talk about that a lot, the fact that, yeah, so much of this is subsidized. We don't really have a sense of what the actual cost versus value is. And I think that rationalization is coming pretty quickly. But well, listen, Melissa, thank you for, you know, giving us insight into sort of your point of the world that we don't necessarily dig into a lot on the brand and marketing side, but it's good to connect the dots to it for what's going on in AI. And I know for a lot of people that work in the enterprise space, they're trying to make sure that they don't, kind of like you said, don't destroy, you know, decades and decades of brand value that they've helped create for a long time with some, you know, mistaken AI system. So
yeah, thank you for having me.
Thank you very much. And for folks, you know, as you're listening, we will put links in the show notes to all the things that Outlever puts together in terms of state of brand, state of AI, and other things. It's a very, very active group putting out a lot of really good work. So I want to thank Melissa for her time. Folks, thanks for listening. Thanks for telling a friend about the show and helping us grow the audience. And with that, we'll talk to you next week.
Thanks for listening. Check us out at theenterpriseaishow.com for past shows, newsletters, and all things enterprise AI.